Captain's Log, subdate 200706. I have sent a probe into Rillier, as the gates appear to be locked. My intention is to look for a way inside. He had better not have turned my room into another one of his slaves' quarters. With the subject we are going to cover today, there is an inherent issue and risk. The risk is I'm not going to be able to get my point across because I'm somehow going to get clouded by the negative aspects of it. That would be consequences and laws that in any way make it difficult for someone to, and then what the subject of the title of the video is, here. Before we get into that though, there are new plushes on Etsy and I have a new video on Moistky Live. If you'd like to support this channel and help my sister get a new kitchen, please consider purchasing one. Link to both down in the description down below. So today the topic is an opinion piece on free speech. There have been many good videos done by many other creators on this subject. My favourite is in fact a video by Count Dankula, who recently, in a positive consequence of free speech, got some of his monetization back. Congratulations, Marcus. You actually deserve that. I will link his free speech video down below where he lists a bunch of points. I actually agree with all those points, which means this video should surely end here. No, it is not going to end here though, because there are questions I get from time to time, not the repeated comment I'm now currently getting of, when are you doing a video on Charlie Gold? I was half tempted to mark it as spam because you've sent it so many times. But I'm going to honour my views on free speech and just ignore it, because I don't know what's going on anyway. So to start, we should of course address a few questions. Do I support one's ability and right to say whatever they like? The answer is yes. 100% yes. I also believe that the ability and right to say whatever you want should be protected in some kind of constitution or law that prevents others from trying to take away one's ability to speak freely. The next question should be, does one in the United Kingdom have the ability to do so? Yes? That is the answer, by the way. There is more to it, because there is something that says no. And that is where you introduce laws that, depending on the context, introduce a consequence, which is, yes, you can speak, but this will happen as a consequence, which handily leads on to the next question of, should there be a consequence for being allowed to speak your mind? And, of course, at the same time, does my believing all that have free speech should be free of consequence? Those are very vague questions. So I'm going to introduce some parameters now. If during this I say the following, I believe in free speech, but you've lost the argument. In this video, context matters. I know in many instances it does not, but it really does matter to me. So with the question of should there be consequences for being allowed to speak your mind, there are differing contexts depending on how you are perceiving one being allowed to speak their mind. Consequence is a guarantee the moment you say anything at any time in any place. It is a guarantee because it is inevitable. How it is determined to be positive and or negative is entirely subjective. This is where it gets a tad tricky, because I will always support one's ability to speak, but I'm also aware that depending on the context, there could be a negative consequence, and this is where I could insert, for the sake of it, as an example, the United Kingdom's hate crime laws. Since my intention is to focus this predominantly on the United Kingdom because we're a bit weird, I'm going to talk about the Crown Prosecution Service's hate crime law. The term hate crime can be used to describe a range of criminal behaviour where the perpetrator is motivated by hostility or demonstrates hostility towards the victim's disability, race, religion, sexual orientation, or transgender identity. These aspects of a person's identity are known as protected characteristics. A hate crime can include verbal abuse, intimidation, threats, harassment, assault, and bullying, as well as damage to property. In the context of hate crimes, and we could use examples of many of those taken to the extreme, I would argue verbal abuse doesn't matter, walk away, it's fine. Intimidation usually comes with a threat of violence, so threats, harassment, assault, bullying, and damage to property should be treated as separate crimes. Hate crime law in the United Kingdom is nebulous because these terms on their own don't provide enough to explain what could and could not be considered acceptable. But again, it is a massive deviation from the principle of free speech. It is just one of those examples where it is very difficult to explain whether a consequence could in fact or should in fact exist under what could or could not inhibit one's ability to speak freely. While I was writing notes for this in my minuscule handwriting, I reached out to irate Alex. The reason for that was because I wanted somebody to poke holes at what I thought. So I showed him the notes, zoomed in 1,000 times so he could read it, and he poked holes. One of the holes he poked into this was when he referenced that not all speech had to be considered negative, and in fact there are many positive consequences of free speech. But because of the environment we live in on the internet, on social media, which we can now reintroduce, it's very hard to see the positive change that can in fact happen. I would argue Ethan Klein used his free speech with connections at YouTube to return the monetization to a number of channels. That is a positive consequence that impacted on the likes of Irate Alex and Count Dankula, something for which I am eternally grateful for. Another little opportunity has now arisen. I have now spoken of consequences. Last week, when I referenced and spoke about consequences when it came to cancel culture, I did not acknowledge, and this was an error I made in that video, that cancellation could in fact be a consequence of one's actions, one's ability to speak freely, do, say, think, whatever you like online. There is a consequence, and social media now handily falls into the bracket of, does social media have free speech? No, it doesn't. Social media has terms of service. It is why you'll find yourself suspended on Twitter if you tweet out individual words that are deemed unacceptable, or for thinking the wrong thing, which is why many have moved to Parler. They would have gone to Gab, the free speech social media platform, but Gab is not free speech either, that's cringe. Social media platforms for the most part rely heavily on income from sponsors who have varying levels of tolerance towards what one can say on those sites. It is why advertisers essentially run YouTube, which is why many of us struggle to get videos monetized, like myself, because as a consequence of what I think, I have videos dubbed hateful towards those who have protected characteristics. I'm still allowed to say what I think, but there is a consequence of it, and that consequence is then reviewed by a human, doubt. It is then deemed to be good, bad, positive, negative, monetized or limited, depending on the subjective of the person reviewing it, who may well not share the values I have, which is why it is so difficult for anyone in commentary at present to make any progress by exercising their freedom to speak. With the United Kingdom, free speech isn't exactly protected. The government keeps claiming it is, but it really isn't. More and more is done day by day to erode at it by making things more protected for people who are considered victims, by making it harder for those who have a differing opinion, normally those who sit on the right, to speak up without them being absolutely, as a consequence, lambasted by others who share the freedom to speak-ish as subjects of the crown, which will then lead as another consequence to politicians clamping down even further on those dissenting opinions. One's ability to speak is like one's ability to protest. It should be, provided it is peaceful, it should be protected. And I don't believe that anyone who speaks their mind should, as a consequence of saying what they think, be punished under law. Court of public opinion is something completely different, and that is usually influenced by society at large. I would never seek to control the people, and those that seek to legislate to reduce and limit what one can say in varying settings on varying platforms, those people are not pro-free speech. Consequences will always exist for speaking, it is a fact. I think on the third attempt of recording this I may have made my point a bit better than the first 2 times. With the subject of freedom to speak, I'd love to know what you think. Please do let me know in the comments down below. If I don't see you on Omegon Plays tonight, because I'm streaming there later today, I hope you'll have a fantastic Monday, and thank you all for listening.